All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. We appreciate you attending this BILT webinar today. We're going to be talking about transforming training and enablement. My name is Eric Dietz. I'm an executive vice president with BILT, and I'm going to be, kind of leading the presentation here today. Just as far as some quick housekeeping, I expect if I do this right, the content should be 15, 20 minutes, a little bit more of a monologue, just in terms of to level set and present what we've got here today. Certainly for the group that's attending, feel free to message in any questions. We'll try to get to those at the end of the time. Anything we don't get to, myself or a BILT team member will certainly reach back out and provide any responses we can to your inquiries. So with that said, again, today our topic is about transforming training and enablement programs. And to kind of set some, I don't want to say ground rules, but in terms of the what it takes to do that, clearly when you're talking about an organizational process that has such deep tentacles in all sorts of places inside the organization, whether it relates to product, to marketing, to sales, to operations, et cetera, it takes a village, if you will. There's people are critical, process is critical, and the technology stack that you use to support it all is critical. To kind of define or at least fence in a little bit what we're going to be covering today, we are going to be spending the bulk of our time talking about the technology side. I mean, that is the area BILT contributes the most to in terms of businesses that leverage our 3D interactive instructions is part of their tech stack to train and enable, to upskill, to cross-skill, and everywhere in between. So again, just to be clear, we're fully cognizant of the fact that when you are modernizing your training program, you got to have the right people, you got to set up the right process to ensure, consistency, scalability, et cetera. And you ultimately need the right enabling tech. But again, today we're going to be speaking mostly about the tech side of things. So recently, BILT had conducted some industry research. We were able to interview a few hundred executives from both manufacturers as well as organizations that have large-scale field technician or field service organizations. And there's been some pretty interesting findings that came out of that we want to kind of share with the group. The first is the 89 represents 89% of these executives that we surveyed. And again, these are executives that ultimately have responsibility for training and enablement. 89% of them had indicated that their current training and enablement, their content, as well as their tech, was not going, or it was insufficient, I think is the word they ultimately applied to what their current tech is and content is in a position to do. And basically 89% said it's ineffective, inefficient, not good. That's part one. Part two, the 58%. 58% of these executives also said they are now having to train new hires to do more tasks than they did even 2 to 5 years ago. So basically, if we go left to right, what they have is insufficient. Number two, they're trying to train new hires to do more than they ever did. Not a winning combo. And then you add to that, or it all compounds into the 11. The 11% is the expected output decline, 11% expected output decline from a productivity standpoint. So, you put all these things together, there's meaningful business impact that these, the folks that we had met with at least indicated they're headed for some pretty choppy seas if they don't retool and transform the way they train and enable, whether it's the front lines of their manufacturing teams, their field service teams, their distributor and partner networks. Training and enablement is a massive thing that has massive business impact if again, these organizations don't find a way to modernize it and meet the needs of today. So just some interesting fun facts and side note on this, on BILT's website, we do have the full research study that has a heck of a lot more interesting nuggets embedded in the study. So we strongly recommend anyone that's listening to this, please go to our website and download the full study. So when we talk about transforming the tech and the content associated with these training programs, it's important a lot of times to kind of baseline in where are most people now. Like I referenced earlier that in our survey, people said it was insufficient, but then if you double click on that, what does that really mean? If you look at the words that are on the screen, like these are some of the common attributes that were referenced in terms of these training organizations that were relying on binders and PDFs and very antiquated methodologies. They're reliant on pure on-the-job training where you've got, Joey, who's been doing this for 50 years, has to spend time with Susie or Billy, the new person, and try to train them in an extensive way and go deep, but all the way from the 101 level coursework all the way to the 401 level coursework. So these deep one-to-one relationships are required today, which is not scalable. I mean, yes, there's some positives to it, but again, not scalable, not efficient, et cetera. And that kind of also correlates to it's very reliant on a few people. It's frankly, it's the silver hairs like yours truly that have been around, seen a lot of stuff, but they're the ones that have all this tribal knowledge. They've got to try to, diffuse across the next crop of talent. Also, it is very one directional, and that's not something that, certainly the younger generations that are coming into the workforce or we're trying to pull into skilled trades and other elements of the workforce that need this type of training. They want to be able to participate. They want to be able to share and say, hey, this works for me. This is working, this is not. And so that it can be more of a conversational approach or bi-directional versus, the way it is today. When I reference static, this is one of the things when we talk to these manufacturing and field service executives, they've been doing the same thing for 20 years. You talk about static, it is about as static as it can be. Not a great situation. And lastly, when we talk about centralized, there's a lot of businesses that are still super, super reliant on, hey, we got to fly everybody into the home office, or, tell you what, we're going to rent out a conference room in a small hotel somewhere in a region and have everybody come in there for a 2 or 3 day boot camp, and we're going to throw up on you all sorts of information that, frankly, they're lucky if people retain 20 to 30% of that after such an immersive session, because they go out into the field and they may not touch the piece of equipment for 6 months that they got trained on in this conference room of a hotel in the middle of nowhere. So this type of setup ultimately leads to those bad outcomes we were referencing before in terms of 11% decline in productivity and output. No surprise, right? Like, what does a transformed training and enablement program look like? Basically the antithesis of what we just kind of walked through before. Digital, no surprise, one to many. So a quick kind of double click on the one-to-many element of it. And what we mean by that is, so in some of our client work, what we've been able to do is build instructional assets that allow, the new recruits to be able to, whether it's on their own time or on company time, be able to become more familiar with instructions or training content and in a way that they like to consume it in a much more digital and interactive way. But they can get up to speed on the 101 and 201 level stuff. In some cases, they have even 301. So when they do sit down with Joey, who's been here for 50 years, Joey can just help them refine things. So he or she can work across a broader array or a broader segment of the new hires without having to go all the way tip to tail with them. They can just, teach them, mentor them on just the finer points, and that may be a little bit more difficult to grasp. Multimodal, one of the things that we've got some more data on this here in a second, but people don't learn the way they used to, and arguably they never did really learn that way, but that's just what they were forced to, where it's, hey, you just get this PDF binder or PDF or big thick binder, go look at it, right? Not an ideal scenario. The other things, again, I won't necessarily drain this whole slide, but one of the ones that we do want to reference that we see quite a bit is we're doing more in the immersive sector is the whole concept of being decentralized. And so the fact that if you can create more immersive and or effective content that it can used where the new trainee is already sitting, they don't have to come in to get the training, so they can get through, let's just say it's 70, 80, 90% of the content, whether it's in an AR VR setting, where they can actually be developing some muscle memory on different procedures, or even just using, standard their standard hardware, their iPhones or their tablets, to become more proficient at different tasks. Like, these things again can allow people to get trained at a distance. And sure, there may still be a requirement here and there for credentialing and certification where you've got to bring them in, but the volume and the scale, and frankly, the expense related to it's always got to be on site. Like, a lot of those things just go away again from the resource drag and the expense. So, as I mentioned, we had a little bit more content reference to, like, we talk about multimodal. This was from another study that BILT had recently come across, where the numbers kind of speak for themselves in terms of how much content or how much knowledge do you actually retain when you just read it or you just hear it, etc. So bottom line, and I think this is very straightforward, and it should be, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody here. But basically, if I can see it, I can hear it, and I can do it kinesthetically when touching and in an interactive way, I mean, the numbers there's a massive differential in terms of the amount of knowledge that's retained. So once again, I come back to the premise of this webinar in terms of how, when, where you can transform and modernize your enablement programs, thinking about building out content that has all three. If you use BILT, we'd love it, right? But if you don't, that's okay too. But just make sure that you're developing this type of content that really meets the learners where they are, how they like to learn, and in a way that really enables them to retain the most content in the most efficient way possible. So one other thing I like to reference here and just ask people to expand their vantage point, or just take a different vantage point on training and enablement is not just onboarding. Like, a lot of clients, sure, there's a big lift that goes into onboarding, but if you think about all the different places that training and enablement actually occurs and that can benefit from more interactive digital content, think about things that are just, field reference guide, resources for your customer contact or your technical support teams. The sales support one, like, this is one we see a lot, where if I'm trying to gain, mind share or frankly shelf space in a distributor, in a organization where you sell through distributors and you want distributors to really promote your products over your competitors, what's a great way to do that? Make your product the easiest and most enjoyable for both the distributor and their end customer to work with. And so again, when you think about training and enablement, think about these different use cases. And again, I'm not going to read across all of these. The only other one I'm going to reference or kind of point to is when we talk about skilled trade education. We encourage and this is a place we're spending a lot more time in terms of working with organizations, whether it's in the electrical sector, the HVAC, plumbing, fill in the blank on skilled trades, working with those leading organizations to build out content that frankly encourages the next generation to enter the trade. Because, a lot of those folks right now, or those trades, are trying to pull from baristas or frankly hairstylists or anywhere. They're trying to find bodies to fill these jobs. Those bodies are not necessarily enticed by, again, here's a big binder, good luck to you. They want to see modern tech that shows the trade and the companies are investing in making them successful. So we also don't suggest you do this just for funsies, right? Or because it's the right thing to do. When it comes to training and enablement and transforming it / modernizing it, it's because there's real money here. There's real money to be saved and made. Once again, you can see a lot of words on the screen, but I genuinely encourage you to think about these different things, at least categorically. The first order ones, I would almost guarantee in all of your businesses, whether it's cost, how you're spending money, how you're making money, or mitigating risk. there's so many of our clients, especially in the professional sector, where the amount of risk we've been able to take out of the equation in terms of, just the simple health and safety benefits of people being better trained and enabled before they start touching something that could go boom. Clearly huge, huge, huge. The second order benefits, that I'd want to call attention to, a lot of our clients have sustainability objectives, and that's whether it's reducing paper, they don't have to print out those 900-page manuals anymore, whether it's reducing carbon footprints related to, hey, not everybody's got to fly into home office anymore. That is a significant savings, both from a sustainability and environmental impact, as well as just an overall, it's a better experience for the business and the new recruit. But I would also, indicate or circle back on, this will help you accelerate your recruiting efforts, because all these organizations that, certainly clients we talk to and others we talk to in the industry, manufacturers and field service organizations alike, they've got three challenges. They're trying to attract new people, they're trying to train them, and they're trying to retain them. A modernized, transformed program genuinely helps across all three. As I said, people don't want to come into a business or into a trade that they're dealing with antiquated crap. Like, they want to come into a business that's modern. That'll then help you train them up, upskill them, make them productive, reduce that time to proficiency. And bottom line, they're going to stick around long, which is massive. The other thing I'd say is from an inclusivity standpoint. I mean, there's a lot of statistics out there in terms of the way people learn, and how more and more folks that are entering the workforce are on some shade of being neurodivergent, and whether it's dyslexia or whatever, they need new ways to learn that aren't, again, reliant on big ass binders. So there's just so many first order as well as second order benefits that, once again, you can achieve without BILT just by focusing on how do you modernize and improve the content you use to train and enable. All right. So this is admittedly, a little bit of the paid political announcement associated with this, just to give everybody a sense of kind of what BILT is. We are a 3D interactive instructions provider. We create the instructions for our clients via managed services offering, but then the instructions are ultimately delivered via BILT's mobile apps. We have one that works basically on any Android or iOS device, and we also have another one, and I'll show you both of these here in a second, that is purpose-built for Apple Vision Pro to take advantage of all the capabilities that is spatial computing, or that Apple has enabled through spatial computing. That's a much more immersive, augmented reality style environment. I would also reference, this isn't BILT's first rodeo. We've been around for years. BILT's app has been used by millions and millions and millions of users around the world, literally 170 plus countries, multilingual, and by hundreds of brands. Some of those that have, illustrated there on the bottom. So first thing I'm going to do, as I referenced, we do have an app that's purpose-built for Vision Pro. I've got kind of a 36, I think it's like a 30-second video vignette just to show you what it actually looks like. And so let me pull that up just so you've got a sense of it. And so this is, do a quick voiceover, but this was an instructional asset we had developed for some of our military use cases. When you're training a new airman, she or he, how do they work on an engine? Well, without actually having to be in a place where they've got the engine sitting in front of them, that if we're able to have, in essence, a digital twin, overlay work instructions on that digital asset that show him or her, here's step one, here's step two, they can build that muscle memory and proficiency, again, without, at least in terms of those 101, 201 level, modules of how to do the task, without actually needing hands on the product to start. So that's just, again, a very quick vignette related to Vision Pro. I was going to show you now, there's a secondary one that just shows kind of the BILT standard, if you will, when it is compatible with both Android as well as Apple products. But here, let me go ahead and show you this. Hmm. Pretty straightforward, and I think that the video does a good job of just kind of referencing or highlighting some of the key elements that make the app so effective when, again, training and enabling digital natives. So let's talk briefly here, and I think this is probably, I believe, is my last slide of content. So for those of you that have hung on, you're almost at the finish line with me, and I appreciate it. And we'll jump then to some questions. We've got a couple that have come in so far. So, giving you a way to think about what's an ideal fit for BILT, from a use case as well as characteristics. For clients that are reliant on a large, corpus of third-party dealers or service networks, BILT can be a massive asset because a lot of times these third-party dealer and service networks, they're not in the OEM's digital ecosystem. Again, when I talked about distributors earlier, they're repping and distributing other products, so they're not going to be beholden to you. So having something like BILT, which is an easy to access app that, again, that's not even, it's yes, the distributors, but also those third-party folks or the end users that are going to walk in and actually buy the product and install the product, making sure they have an asset in their hand is absolutely critical. The digital natives and enabling, that next generation of technician and frontline worker, I don't think anybody's surprised by that. I mean, frankly, that's pretty straightforward. But the other characteristics I would reference is geographically distributed, because BILT's value proposition continues to rise when you do need a very quick, easy access to multilingual assets and being able to deploy something around the world or even within different geos or regions within a single country. Complex but consistent processes. If you're training people on how to do things that are 2 and 3 steps, yeah, probably not. BILT is probably not a fit for you. But when you really do have complex, products that genuinely require people to spend some time on how to get up to speed, or even after you do that, once you train them, giving them simple access to something they can refer back to when they're out in the field, hugely beneficial. Also, volume matters. If you've got one process that's done once a year, again, unless it's an ultra high value process, probably not worth it. But when you do have a lot of heads that are either turning over and or you are rapidly scaling, and you need an effective, efficient way to enable those folks, once again, that's where we come into play. I don't think anyone's immune from this last, or not the last, but when I talk about loss of institutional knowledge, the silver wave is frankly impacting every industry that's got some degree of a skilled trade or skilled manual labor workforce out there. It's something we've continued to see. A lot of industries, again, HVAC, plumbing, electrician. You talk about shortages of the hundreds of thousands of folks that are leaving that current state today. We don't have a backfill for. So they're trying to. Those industries and those providers are rapidly trying to recruit, and we're seeing a lot of positive indicators that the recruitment efforts they're all putting forward, they're working. But then the next phase of the challenge is, all right, now you got to train them and enable them, which is where we come in. And I've already touched on the fact that certainly from a digital native standpoint, that is something the next generations, they just are. They all, most of these younger folks, they were kind of born with iPad or tablet in hand, and that's the way they need to learn. So I'm going to pause there, end the monologue. We've had a few questions that have come in. The first one was asked about the potential to embed BILT in whether it's content management systems, learning management systems. The short answer is yes. it can be done. And that's a great use case because we're quick to say at BILT, like we know our swim lane. We're not an LMS system, we're not a content management system. We are in essence content that can be and should be embedded in those, frankly, broader systems that are tasked with tracking the learning journey, testing, and certifying mastery of content. And so again, BILT is kind of intended to be plugged into those environments. One other question we got real quick was related to white labeling. At this moment in time, just to be clear, we are not in a position to allow we can't be white labeled. I think there's some different scenarios where there is a path to gray label, but I would also advocate, given millions of folks around the world have used BILT, whether in their professional life or in their consumer life. Millions of people have used us to put together flat pack furniture or put in ceiling fans and a host of other things, that there is value to letting people know you're using BILT as an instructional partner just because of familiarity and historic use.
We have one more question about pulling in engagement and performance analytics.
So for those who couldn't hear that, there was a question about what can be ingested potentially or pulled in relative to other data sets for usage, et cetera. Currently today, BILT does not ingest those things. BILT is more of, I would consider, a data provider, that we are measuring things like, how often is the instruction being accessed, what's the time per step, as well as end user feedback that has been provided on the instructions. And that's actually just kind of another second order benefit we would advocate for with BILT is, if Joey the tech is using BILT out in the field, he or she can provide feedback directly after using the instruction to say, hey, step number 2 made a lot of sense, but step 4 really confused me, or hey, step 7 should be exploded into 4 different steps instead of trying to consolidate into one. So we're constantly, in conjunction with our clients, of course, we're constantly looking to improve the end user experience. So shorter way to say it is, BILT is more of a data out play versus a data in play. And I think we wanted to hit the mark of wrapping up right around 30 minutes. So we're standing on the precipice of doing that. So we're able to stick the landing here. As you can see on the screen, there's a QR code that'll take you to our corp site, and just for the added sex appeal, it does bring you to the Apple Vision Pro portion of our website, so you can see content related to our more immersive offering. My contact information is on the screen, but obviously, there's a lot of other ways to get in contact with BILT. If you didn't get a chance to answer or ask a particular question and you want to do so afterwards, please don't hesitate to follow up with me, or again, at BILT, we're easy to find. So we thank you for your time, your attention, and hope this was a meaningful session for everyone, and wish you the best for the rest of your day and week. Bye-bye.